was a Stones man because everybody at school were Beatle people. I think I always wanted to be different to what everybody else was. But then I heard Twist and Shout. That kind of tipped me maybe towards the Beatles. You know, I changed. You know, when I was about 14, Mum and Dad bought me a guitar. And the only records at the time were like the Shadows, like records with solo guitar stuff. They had an album out, and on the back of the sleeve was some notes about a recording session. And I didn't know about recording, tape machines, anything in those days. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Wrote them a letter sort of saying that God knows what I said in it, but I went there, they asked me various questions, and I must have done sort of okay. And about 3 months later, they rang up and said, oh, can you come back for another interview? And I went back, and they said, oh, can you start next week? Two of us started, a guy called Peter Mew and I both started on the same day, and he kind of still works there every now and then, so he's never left since 1965. I was 18 years old when I started, so I must have been about 6 months in this tape library, and then I went on to being an assistant, and then later on I started working with the Beatles. They didn't really like different people being around. They were very secretive about what they did. When I started, for instance, nobody spoke to me for about 4 days or something. I was just this, who's this guy in the corner, you know? And then once you're there, you know, we were sort of part of the family, as it were. The first one I can remember recording from scratch was Good Day Sunshine. And we had a little hiccup with the vocals. Halfway through that, I wiped some vocals or started recording, and, you know, nothing happened. There was a big silence, and John said something like, what happened to the vocals in the cans? And George Martin looked across at me, and I don't think I went red, but I sort of went, pardon? He said, well, where did you drop in, Richard? And I said, oh, after I'd counted however many vocal lines there were, and I counted wrong. You know, I thought it was 7 and it should have been after 9. So it went very quiet, and George was very good. George sort of said, oh, we've had a bit of a problem. Can you sing those again? And they did, and I can remember thinking at the time, what are they going to say when they come up in the control room? You know, will they sort of point to me or look at... No problem, you know, nothing was ever said about it. Phil Spector's sound was reverb, and Geoff's sound was compressed drums, you know. He wanted to try and get everything to jump out of the speaker rather than be kind of a room sound. He just thought, well, if I put the mic there, if I put the mic right in front of the sound, right where the sound is, providing the mic can take the dynamic range of the instrument, then we'll be fine, you know. And he'd be running from the studio to the control room to the studio, fiddling with the amp, getting the guitarist to change, make the amp brighter. None of all this, you know, doing it all in here. Mm-hmm. If it didn't sound right out there, forget about in here. It's got to be right out there. So I think that combined with, you know, the ADT, the tape echo, the flanging, whatever you want to call it, put together, just makes those records at the time just sound so unique. I mean, everybody was very influenced by the Beatles. The whole is, you know, poor old Graham wanted to totally change the way his album, or their album was. I mean, their album was more or less finished. And then they heard some dogs barking and sort of cows mooing and whatever on Good Morning, Good Morning. We've got to have that on our record. We can put it on our record. I said, oh. And of course we did it all, and then they decided they didn't like it. So then we had to undo all these edits, and it was a nightmare. Day in the life was just, I mean, the musicians were just told, you know, you start on this note here and just play anything you want. That was sort of like foreign to them. I mean, that and All You Need Is Love stick in my mind as, you know, the two of the most amazing days at Abbey Road, you know. I mean, All You Need Is Love had so much pressure on all of us for getting through this song without a problem, you know, because there was however many million people watching, you know. It was a team. I mean, it was a team of people. Geoff and I had a great relationship, and we liked to have a laugh, you know. And Geoff would do something, and he'd look across to me, you know, and if I was laughing or I was sort of putting my thumb up, or I'd be flanging something, and it would work really well, you know, and they wouldn't necessarily notice what was going on, you know. And George Martin wouldn't necessarily say anything, or he'd say, "Oh, honestly, Richard, that's too much," you know. And but Geoff would go, "Yeah, it's great," you know, and then it would be a combination of John and Geoff and I saying "great," and then, well, sorry, we've won that battle, you know. So it was a kind of a team thing, which is why I insist that everybody buys the mono pepper, not the stereo version, because the mono's the one where we were all there. Well, after all the Beatles stuff, I did two solo albums, one with John Lennon, and one with McCartney. Both albums, somebody else had started the album, and I came in sort of either halfway through or towards the end of it. And Alan was working on Red Rose Speedway, and then Alan went on to work with Pink Floyd on the start of Dark Side of the Moon. Well, they figured out they wanted to have talking on the album, so they sort of wrote out a list of questions on a piece of paper and then dragged anybody that was working in the studios in with their permission to answer all these questions. One of the questions was, you know, is the moon dark? Is there a dark side of the moon? Is the moon dark? One of them was, when did you last have a fight? And he was just sitting there with a mic in the studio, and a chap sitting on who I didn't know, was sitting on a chair just answering these questions. And I made some smart comment like, "Oh, this is really exciting." And Alan said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, we recorded My Love, you know, the single last night, you know, with an orchestra, and Paul sang live." And, you know, Alan sort of twitched and said, oh, okay. So I think he was feeling as though he got the wrong end of the stick doing these voice records. It's been sort of quite successful for him since then, so. First ever session I did was with the band called the Ormsby Brothers, and we did a cover version of a song called "You Don't Own Me," and it went to number one. So I'd gone from McCartney's number one to the Ormsby Brothers number one. I then did some recording with George Young and Harry Vanda in the Easy Beats. We did Evie, the song Evie, with Stevie Wright. One of those memorable sessions of somebody singing something where you go, wow, what a vocal, you know, and it doesn't happen a lot. You just get this great performance, and your hair stands on end, and your hair stands on your arms. And Stevie sang the slow version of Evie, I think, in one take, and it was just fantastic, you know, great performance. And you go, God, I was there when they did that, you know. It's one of the great things about the job is, or for me, one of the great things about the job is if you have moments like that when you hear a great performance, it's makes it all the bad stuff you do, those kind of shine through as being great moments, you know. I mean, it's weird to think that this room's going, just thinking about it now. I mean, there's a lot of effort. Martin Benge and Tom and Steve Crane and I put a lot of effort into getting the studio how we wanted it. I think my fondest memories, gosh, that's a difficult one. Here in this studio, in this building, probably the most challenging was recording the music for the Olympics. Most of it was recorded here. Some of it was recorded at the Opera House, but it was all mixed here, in this room actually. Most of it was mixed in here. The old 301, obviously the Howzat album with Sherbet, we had a lot of laughs, a lot of port, a lot of pizza at 3 a.m, and it was just a great period. It was just one of those fun records to do. All the things you want for a great record happened on that record, and I had the same feeling at the end of that record, where I wanted people to hear the song Howzat, because I was really proud of it and thought we'd done a really good job. And it was kind of similar on Day in the Life. Once you'd finished that, you wanted people to kind of hear it and go, wow, and the same thing, funnily enough, the same thing happened. So it was that was my memories of 301. I mean, many more funny and horrific, but those were the best memories, fun, good times. And now it's gonna go.